Hey everybody, this is Barry Johnson. Today I'd like to ask you, how many plugins do you own? I'm just curious, how many plugins do you own, do you use on a regular basis? And I wonder what they do for you in your workflow. I was recently on the gear page, which used to be Gear Sluts. Good shout out to that page. Great place if you want to learn about recording and really kind of get to know and talk to a lot of people about recording. You can learn a lot, share a lot, and just have a good community over there. But just make sure you stay positive while you're there. So anyway, I happened to be in a thread about SSL came out with I think it's called the UCI controller. It's a controller for their native plugins. Primarily, I can't remember which version of the SSL console it was. I think the 9000 if I remember, something like that. And as well as their bus compressor. Now, I know there's a lot of manufacturers out there that have done versions of SSL consoles. You have Waves, you have Steven Slate, you've got obviously SSL, and there's a bunch of others. As an example, I have experience using the Waves version as well as the Steven Slate version. So I watched a video on YouTube the other day where they were using the SSL version, and I remember when the SSL plugins first came out where you had to have a dedicated device to be able to run them all on. So that's going way back, and so there was a lot of hype about that back in the day, but we've come a long ways with technology since then. And so anyway, so I saw a video using SSL's version of their native plugins, and I thought I'd demo it and give it a try. And I have to tell you, it's my favorite by far. I mean, it's vastly different than the others. Now, you would all expect them to be different because they're modeled after different consoles, and I guess that's how they kind of get away without having to compete with each other too much. But the reality was the end result was so much better on the SSL version of their console, or the console they modeled, and you should expect that they would do the best job, I would think. But regardless of that, it made me wonder, how many different EQ plugins do I own? And I started thinking about it, and I own a lot. I mean a lot. I mean more. I own some I've never even used. I own that many. Over the years I've gotten all caught up in the whole, hey, it's new, so I've got to try that out, and I want that because it's new and shiny, and I think there's a lot of people out there like me. But at the end of the day, you could argue whether that's the wisest use of your money or not. But regardless, I've ended up with a ton of plugins. I also ended up with a lot of gear, and I'm not letting any of it go, by the way. But I started thinking, you can see back there's a DigiDesign DCommand that I use for my Pro Tools HD native system. And I love that board. It's a fantastic mouse, but it does mouse work really, really good. And I like it a lot. I started looking at that new UCI controller, and it made me actually question, do I want to buy that thing? And then I start getting flooded with questions on the gear page saying, hey, what are you doing? You've got a freaking DCommand back there. Why in the world do you need a dedicated controller for one plugin? And, there's a good argument to be made there, and that kind of, the newness maybe in my mind kind of wore out. I wish those plugins were mapped to the dedicated EQ and dynamic section of the DCommand, but unfortunately they're not. They're kind of partially mapped out. So, but you can still use it across the console and adjust all the plugin and parameters that way. So it's really no big deal. But what it really got me thinking was I kind of wanted to do a test. I wanted to see. I really liked that let's call it the channel strip. I really liked that so much. I went back and redid a couple of mixes that I'd done before using that plugin. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not, hey, go out and buy the SSL's version of their emulation of their console. That's not what this is about. What this got me thinking about is, do I really need that many channel strips? Do I really need that many different EQs out there? One of the guys brought up, and it was a good point he brought up, he said, the difference between today and what you see in professional studios, oftentimes when it gets to somebody like Chris Lord-Alge or whatever, those have already been recorded oftentimes through the greatest gear. So what he's getting to work with is radically different than, for the most part, what a lot of you and I are able to start working with in the DAW. In other words, when we go to record many, and I would argue probably a high percentage when you look at the whole gamut of people who use DAWs out there, the vast majority of them are probably just going into the preamp on their interface. And I know I did that for a long time, back a long time ago, until I could actually start to afford and appreciate the value of dedicated preamps. And I have quite a decent selection of dedicated preamps in my studio, whether it be Great River, basically Neve emulations or API emulations, Trident emulations, across the board. Not emulations, but I guess they're modeled, the hardware is modeled after the original preamps. And so, you technically get the flavor from those. But anyway, his argument was, today, oftentimes we're working with almost a sterile recording if we're doing it all ourselves, or at least for a lot of people out there, a sterile recording. And it kind of made me think, he's right. And because his point was, the reason I use different EQs is to get that tonal flavor, across my mix, because I don't have the advantage, or I'm speaking as if I'm him. He felt like he didn't have the advantage, or a lot of people don't have the advantage of being able to record through quality preamps. And, I think these days, I think in professional studios and things like that, I think they're still maybe recording through some hardware EQ and maybe some light compression on the way in. But still, when it gets time to a mixer, again, like Chris Lord Algae, he's working with files that we're not working with when we go to mix typically. And you'd expect that. He's in a high-end studio. But it made me wonder, because what I've been thinking lately is, you know what? Why don't I just find one channel strip that I feel like I can live with and work with that? And I'd never really given that serious thought. I mean, of course, I've considered it over the years, but I think I really enjoyed the SSL version of their plugins, their native version, or Solid State Logic, their SSL board emulation. I really like that so much. I think I'm going to try that. So I pulled up a couple, I think I said this before, but I pulled up a couple of mixes that I'd done before, took all of the plugins off of them, started from scratch, renamed it, of course. So I still had everything from before. And I did nothing but put that SSL channel strip across all tracks. And I used only that. And I was very pleased with what I got. I think a combination of how smooth that EQ is on SSL's version of their native pack compared to, I'd use, like I said, I'd use Wave and Slate's versions. And Wave sounded harsh and high-endy, almost too kind of shrilly to some degree, compared to SSL's version of their plugins. And so it made me wonder, can I get by with just that one? So I actually have one of those UCI controllers on the way. I bought one. I'm going to try it. If I fall in love with it and I find that it works great for my workflow and I want to go that route, I'm going to go that route. I think the odds may be that I may end up returning it simply because I've got such a great mouse back there in the DCommand that enables me to control everything I could ever want to. And so it made me ask the question. I'm curious what you feel about it. Could you live with just one channel strip? Should you live with just one channel strip? It's an interesting question. I'm curious to see what you guys have to think about that. So put that in the comments section below, and let's kind of chat about the pros and cons and the benefits and how you see the workflow today. Because that something could work for you, or do you think this guy's out of his mind on this side of the camera, being me, even suggesting this? And and I could see myself on both sides of the fence of that argument. But just curious to see what you think. Hey, if you like some of the topics we talk about here on this channel's still in its infancy here. If you like some of the topics, hey, hit that like button, that subscribe button, and more importantly, that notification bell so you know when I put out a new video. So until next time, you know what you should do? Have a great day.